I moved to Phoenix in June, right when the heat was starting to get brutal. 95 degrees every day, the kind of dry heat that makes your throat scratch the second you step outside. I just landed a remote software developer job and wanted a fresh start somewhere new. The apartment complex was nothing fancy, but it was clean, affordable, and had decent internet. That's all I really needed. I was 28, single, and honestly just excited to have my own space after years of roommates. On my first day there, I was hauling boxes up to the second floor, sweating through my shirt, when I heard a knock on my open door. I turned around and saw this guy standing there, probably early 40s, black, built like he spent serious time at the gym. He was wearing a tank top and shorts, holding a Chipotle bag with a big smile on his face. "Figured you might be too busy to cook, man. Welcome to the building," he said, extending the bag toward me. I was honestly surprised. In all my years of apartment living, nobody had ever done something like that. I thanked him, and he introduced himself as Marcus from apartment 2C, right next door to my 2B. He told me he was a personal trainer, had been living here for 3 years, and if I ever needed anything, just knock. His whole vibe was relaxed and friendly, the kind of neighbor you feel lucky to have. I remember thinking this was a good sign, that maybe Phoenix was going to work out better than I expected. The first week was when I started noticing Marcus's pattern. Day 2, 7 in the morning, there was a knock on my door. "Bro, I'm heading to the gym, wanna come?" I explained I had to work, thanked him anyway. Day 3, 8 at night, another knock. "I made too much pasta, want some?" He handed me a container of spaghetti that was actually pretty good. Day 4, I was getting my mail when Marcus appeared. "Hey man, I'm running to Costco, need anything?" Day 5, 6:30 in the morning, another knock. "My car won't start, can you give me a jump?" I helped him out, but by then I was starting to realize Marcus somehow knew my schedule. When I worked, when I left the apartment, when I came back. He always had a reason to see me, to interact, to be present. I figured maybe he was just lonely, wanted to make friends. Some of the other neighbors, like Mrs. Chen from 1A and David from 3B, would wave hello, but kept their distance in a normal, healthy way. Marcus was different. He wanted to be involved. By week 2, things escalated in subtle ways. Marcus started leaving things in my apartment. A water bottle here, a protein shaker there, a gym towel on my couch. Then he'd knock later to retrieve them, creating reasons to come back. One night around 11, there was urgent knocking. I opened the door to find Marcus looking stressed. "Man, I locked myself out. Can I wait at your place while the super comes?" I let him in, and we waited for 2 hours. During that time, Marcus asked detailed questions about my work, how much I made, what kind of projects I handled, who my clients were. Then he moved to personal stuff. Where were my parents? Did I have siblings? What did they do for work? It felt intrusive, but I answered because saying no felt rude. Week 3, Marcus knocked again. "Mine crashed, need to send an urgent email to a client," he said, gesturing at my laptop. I handed it over, and when he returned it an hour later, I checked the browser history out of curiosity. He'd searched my name, looked up my LinkedIn profile, found my parents on Facebook. I felt uncomfortable but tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just curious, doing normal background checking that people do. But then Marcus started appearing everywhere. The parking lot when I left for coffee. The laundry room exactly when I was doing laundry. The mailroom right when I checked my mail. The timing was too perfect, too frequent to be coincidence. About a month in, Mrs. Chen pulled me aside in the lobby one Saturday afternoon. She was maybe 70, spoke with a thick accent, and had lived in the building for over a decade. "You need to be careful with Marcus," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure nobody heard. She told me about Jake, the guy who lived in my apartment before me. 25, graphic designer, seemed like a good kid. Marcus did the exact same thing with him. Started friendly, learned his schedule, asked too many questions. Then Jake discovered Marcus had somehow copied his apartment key and had been entering when Jake wasn't home. Jake called the police, but Marcus denied everything, and without solid proof, nothing happened. Jake broke his lease after 4 months and left. The tenant before Jake had a similar experience, though less extreme. Mrs. Chen said the building manager knew about Marcus but couldn't evict him without legal grounds. She urged me to change my locks immediately and avoid him. I was shocked but decided to observe before taking action. That night Marcus knocked. "Hey man, want to watch the game together?" For the first time I said no firmly. "I've got work to catch up on." I watched his expression change for just a split second. The friendly mask slipped and something cold flashed in his eyes before he smiled again. "No worries, bro. Another time." Month 3 was when Marcus's behavior turned genuinely concerning. I started avoiding him, stopped answering his knocks. He switched tactics, leaving notes under my door. "Bro, did I do something wrong? Let's talk." The notes came daily and the tone shifted. "I thought we were friends. Why are you avoiding me?" Then, "This is disrespectful. I welcomed you here." One night around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a sound at my door. I crept to the peephole and saw Marcus trying different keys in my lock, one after another, testing each carefully. My heart was pounding. I yelled through the door, "I'm calling the police." He quickly pulled back and disappeared down the hallway. The next morning, I had a locksmith come change everything. Marcus stood in the hallway the entire time, watching silently with this blank expression that made my skin crawl. The following week, my Amazon packages started disappearing. I requested security footage from the building manager, and it clearly showed Marcus taking my packages into his apartment. I texted him, "I know you took my packages. I have it on camera." He responded an hour later, "Must be a mistake, I'll check." He returned them, but they'd been opened and some items were missing. I started having everything delivered to my office instead. Then Marcus began showing up at places I went. My gym, 3 miles from the building. The coffee shop I liked on Roosevelt Street. He never approached me, just sat there, watching. It was deliberate, calculated, meant to let me know he was always aware of where I was. Late in month 3, David from 3B caught me in the parking lot. "I need to show you something," he said, pulling out his phone. David had installed a security camera at his door because he'd also had issues with Marcus. His footage showed Marcus standing outside my door multiple times every single day, pressing his ear against it, listening. In one clip, Marcus tried using a credit card to jimmy my lock, but the new deadbolt stopped him. David emailed me all the footage. That evening, I heard Marcus talking through the wall between our apartments. His voice was muffled but clear enough. "No, this one's different. He's playing hard to get, but I'll figure him out." There was a pause. "I've got copies of his work files from when I borrowed his laptop. That's leverage." Another pause. "The last guy caved after I took his mail for a week. This guy will too. I just need to find the right pressure point. Everyone has one." I recorded the conversation on my phone, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a clingy neighbor. Marcus was a predator with a system, a pattern he'd perfected. Early April, I met with Mrs. Chen, David, and 2 other neighbors. Jenny from 1C and Tom from 3A. Everyone had stories about Marcus. Jenny said he'd followed her to work multiple times. Tom said Marcus had stolen mail and tried to open credit cards in his name but got caught. We decided to go to the police together with all our evidence. The footage, the recordings, our testimonies. 2 officers came and interviewed Marcus in his apartment. I watched from my peephole as Marcus turned on the charm, laughing with them, shaking his head sadly. When they knocked on my door after, one officer said, "Look, we talked to him. He seems like a nice guy who maybe doesn't understand boundaries. Without a direct threat, we can't do much. Keep documenting everything." That night, Marcus became bolder. Door knocks every hour from 6 in the morning until midnight. Loud music at 3 in the morning. The fire alarm in the hallway went off at 4, and I saw Marcus's door close quietly through my peephole. I was barely sleeping, my work was suffering, and I felt trapped. Then one night I came home around 9 and found my apartment door slightly open. I'd locked it, I was certain. Inside, nothing was obviously missing, but things had been moved. My laptop was in a different position. Clothes in my closet were rearranged. On the kitchen counter sat a handwritten note. "You can't keep me out." I called the police again. They came, looked around, but there were no fingerprints, and Marcus had avoided the hallway cameras. One officer pulled me aside. "This is turning into a civil matter more than criminal. You might want to consider moving." Mid-April, I started packing. I'd found a place in a gated community with better security and was planning to break my lease. One morning, I woke to shouting in the hallway. I looked through the peephole and saw police officers and FBI agents outside Marcus's door, pounding on it. FBI, open up. Marcus came out in handcuffs, and as they walked him past my door, he turned and stared directly at my peephole. His expression was pure hatred, nothing like the friendly neighbor mask he usually wore. I stepped into the hallway with the other neighbors. The building manager explained that Marcus was wanted in Oregon and Nevada for identity theft and stalking. He'd been stealing identities from tenants, opening credit cards in their names, destroying their credit. The files he'd accessed on my laptop were part of an attempt to do the same to me. The FBI had been investigating him for 6 months and finally had enough evidence to arrest him. Later that day, I learned what they found in Marcus's apartment. Photographs of multiple tenants, including me, covering an entire wall. Detailed schedules written out. Personal information, social security numbers, bank account details. He had master key copies for several apartments, taken from the building's spare key set. The building management admitted they'd failed to protect residents and offered anyone the chance to break their lease without penalty. I moved 2 weeks later to that gated community. It was quieter, felt safer, and I finally started sleeping through the night again. 6 months after that, I received a letter informing me that Marcus had been sentenced to 8 years in prison on multiple charges including identity theft, stalking, and breaking and entering. Mrs. Chen texted me that the building had renovated Marcus's old apartment, and a family with kids had moved in. She said the whole place felt different now, lighter. I learned a hard lesson through all of this. Those early red flags, the too friendly behavior, the boundary crossing that seemed minor, I should have trusted my instincts immediately. Now I'm more careful with neighbors. I don't share personal information easily. I'm cautious about who I let into my space, and I pay attention when something feels off. It took months to rebuild my sense of safety, to stop checking over my shoulder constantly. But I'm grateful I spoke up when I did, that I gathered evidence and involved others. Marcus was counting on people being too polite, too uncomfortable to act. He thrived in that silence. I'm still recovering my ability to trust people, but I know I did the right thing by going to the authorities, even when it felt like they weren't taking it seriously at first. The person next door really wasn't who he seemed, and that's something I'll never forget. I was 28 that October when I closed on my first house, a small 2-bedroom bungalow on Maple Street in Portland, Oregon. After years of apartment living and bad roommates, I finally had my own space with a front porch, a little garden and neighbors who seemed friendly enough. The woman next door, Carol, even brought over homemade cookies my first day, welcoming me to the neighborhood with a warm smile. She was maybe 55, always dressed neatly, worked from home doing something with computers. Everything felt perfect, like I'd finally made the right decision becoming a homeowner. My elementary school teaching job kept me busy during the day, and coming home to my own place felt like actual freedom. That first week settled into a comfortable routine. I'd leave for Lincoln Elementary around 7:30 each morning, teach my third graders until 3, then come home to work on unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. Carol would often be visible through her front window, and she'd wave whenever she saw me. At first, I thought it was sweet that she paid attention to the neighborhood. The elderly couple on my other side, the Hendersons, were equally welcoming, bringing over a casserole and offering to help if I needed anything. But I started noticing Carol's waves became more frequent, more deliberate. She'd be at her window when I left in the morning, there when I returned in the afternoon, and visible again when I took out the trash after dinner. One evening, I was watering my front garden when I glanced over and caught her photographing my house with her phone. When I waved, trying to act casual, she quickly lowered the camera and disappeared inside. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on my front porch that definitely weren't mine. They were smaller, narrower, and led right up to my front door before turning back. A package I'd been expecting from Amazon, just some classroom supplies, never arrived even though the tracking said it was delivered. I figured it was porch pirates, a common problem in Portland, and didn't think much more about it. The second week brought clearer warning signs that I tried to rationalize away. My mail started disappearing, not all of it, but specific pieces. Bank statements, a letter from my insurance company, anything that looked official or personal. At school, I was dealing with a particularly challenging student whose parents were demanding constant updates, so I convinced myself I was just stressed and imagining things. But then 3 more packages went missing in 4 days. I finally installed a Ring doorbell camera, mostly to catch whoever was stealing my deliveries. The footage from the first morning made my stomach drop. At 6:15, while I was still asleep upstairs, Carol appeared on my porch. She picked up my mail, flipped through each piece carefully, then took 2 envelopes and walked back to her house. The video was crystal clear. I sat there replaying it, trying to figure out how to handle this. That afternoon, I caught her outside and tried to be diplomatic. "Hey Carol, I think there might have been some confusion with the mail. Have you seen any letters that might have been delivered to your place by mistake?" She smiled, that same warm smile from the first day. "Oh no, honey. I always put anything that comes to me for you right in your mailbox. Are you missing something?" The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I felt crazy for a moment. That night, I noticed her recycling bin at the curb and saw the corner of an envelope with my name on it. When I checked after she went inside, I found 4 pieces of my mail, opened and read, just tossed in with her trash. The knocking started that same week. 10 at night, Carol at my door asking if she could borrow sugar. 6 in the morning, wondering if I knew what day the garbage truck came, even though she'd lived here for 8 years. Each time, I'd answer politely but briefly, and each time, I could see her eyes trying to peek past me into my house. My coworker Jennifer noticed I was exhausted during lunch duty. "You look terrible. Everything okay with the new house?" I told her about Carol, and she immediately said I should call the police. But what would I say? My neighbor knocks on my door and takes my mail. It felt too small, too petty. Then the camera caught something that made me lose sleep for 3 straight nights. At 2:47 in the morning, Carol walked up to my porch, stood directly in front of my door for 15 minutes without moving, just staring at it, then walked away. No knocking, no reason, just standing there in the dark. I saved the footage and started checking the camera obsessively. She also began texting me, friendly messages at first asking about my day, then more specific questions. "What time do you usually get home from school? And do you have plans this weekend?" I kept my responses vague, but the texts kept coming, sometimes 5 or 6 a day. The fourth week, I decided to take a bike ride to clear my head. Teaching had been draining, and the situation with Carol was making my own home feel like a prison. I rode through the neighborhood, taking different streets, trying to relax. When I passed Carol's house from the back alley, I glanced at her windows and froze so hard I nearly fell off my bike. Her living room wall, the one facing away from my house, was covered in photographs. Not just a few, hundreds. All of my house from every possible angle. Close-ups of my windows, my front door, my garden. And mixed in were photos of me. Me getting my mail, me leaving for work, me working in my garden, even one that looked like it was taken through my bedroom window. I could see myself sitting on my bed folding laundry. I rode straight home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely lock up my bike. I called the non-emergency police line, trying to sound calm while explaining what I'd seen. 2 officers arrived within an hour and went next door to talk to Carol. I watched from my window as she invited them inside, smiling and cooperative. They were in there for maybe 20 minutes. When they came back to my house, the older officer looked apologetic. She says she's an amateur photographer working on a project about neighborhood architecture. Since she's taking the photos from her own property and not trespassing on yours, there's no law being broken. We advised her that it might make neighbors uncomfortable, but that's all we can do at this point. The younger officer added quietly, "Keep documenting everything. If she escalates, call us immediately." After they left, my phone buzzed with a text from Carol. A long message about how sorry she was if I misunderstood her hobby, how she never meant to make me uncomfortable, how she just appreciated beautiful houses and wanted to capture the neighborhood's charm. The tone was apologetic but also defensive, like I was the one being unreasonable. That night, I had Jennifer stay over because I couldn't stand the thought of being alone. At 2 in the morning, we both woke up to sounds downstairs. Footsteps on the porch, then the front door handle rattling. Then the back door. Someone was checking to see if my house was locked. Jennifer grabbed her phone while I pulled up the camera app. There was Carol, methodically trying every door and window on the ground floor, testing each one carefully. We called 911, and the operator stayed on the line with us until the police arrived 12 minutes later. By then, Carol had returned to her house, but the cameras had captured everything. This time, the officers took it more seriously. They knocked on her door, and when she answered, they informed her we had video evidence of her attempting to enter my home. She claimed she thought she heard someone breaking in and was trying to help. The officers didn't buy it. They explained that I would be filing for a restraining order the next morning, and she needed to stay away from my property. The restraining order was approved within 3 days. Carol had to maintain at least 100 feet of distance from me and my property. I thought it would finally be over. Instead, she began leaving notes at exactly the boundary line, 98 feet from my front door. I'd find them weighted down with rocks, long rambling messages about misunderstandings and friendship, and how we could have been so close if I'd just given her a chance. The handwriting got messier with each note, the messages more disconnected. Then a large package appeared on my porch. Inside was every piece of mail she'd ever taken, neatly organized by date, along with printed copies of every photograph she'd taken of me, hundreds of them. There was a note on top that read, "Thought you might want these. I was just trying to know you better. Friends share things." I took everything to the police station, and they added it to the growing file. A detective named Morrison reviewed the case and told me to document everything, no matter how small. That same week, when I took my car in for a routine oil change, the mechanic found a GPS tracker attached under the rear bumper. Morrison had it analyzed, and they traced the purchase to an online account connected to one of Carol's email addresses. They brought her in for questioning, and she admitted to buying it but claimed she was trying to protect me because the neighborhood had recent break-ins. There had been no break-ins. The detective also discovered something else during his investigation. Carol had done this before. A previous neighbor at her old apartment complex had filed a restraining order against her 3 years earlier for similar behavior. That case had been dropped when Carol moved away and started treatment for schizophrenia. Apparently, she'd stopped taking her medication 6 months before I moved in. Halloween was 2 days away when everything came to a head. Jennifer had been staying at my house most nights, afraid to leave me alone. The neighborhood was decorated with fake spiders and jack-o'-lanterns, but I couldn't bring myself to participate. At 11 that night, we were watching a movie when the alarm system blared. Someone was at my back door. We ran to the kitchen window and saw Carol standing there with a key, trying to unlock the door. It was the spare key I used to keep under my doormat, the one that had gone missing weeks ago. She didn't know I'd changed all the locks. She kept trying, getting frustrated when the key wouldn't turn, jiggling the handle harder. Jennifer was screaming at her through the door. "Carol, get away from here. We're calling the police." But Carol didn't run. She sat down on the back porch, crossed her legs, and waited. When the police arrived 8 minutes later, she was still sitting there calmly. As they approached, she told them, "I live here too now. I moved my things in through the window yesterday. This is my house too." The officers found a duffel bag hidden beside my shed. Inside were Carol's clothes, toiletries, and a collection that made my skin crawl. Strands of my hair pulled from my brush somehow, receipts from my garbage, photos of me sleeping that must have been taken through my window. She'd created a kind of shrine. Carol started talking rapidly about soul mates and destiny, how the house told her we were meant to share it, how she could feel my presence even when I wasn't there. The officers called for paramedics, recognizing a psychiatric emergency. As they loaded her into the ambulance for evaluation, she kept calling out to me. I was just trying to be close to you. Why couldn't you understand? We were supposed to be friends." The detective explained everything the next morning. Carol had been diagnosed with erotomania, a condition where someone believes another person is in love with them, combined with obsessive fixation. When she stopped taking her medication, the delusions took over completely. She'd fixated on me the moment she saw me move in. In her mind, we had a deep connection that I was denying. Every time I politely declined her invitations or kept conversations short, it reinforced her belief that outside forces were keeping us apart. Carol was committed to a psychiatric facility by court order for at least 6 months of evaluation and treatment. Her adult daughter flew in from California, devastated and apologetic. She explained that her mother had struggled with mental illness for years, that medication compliance was an ongoing battle. She'd moved to Portland to start fresh after the last incident, but clearly hadn't maintained her treatment. The daughter arranged to sell Carol's house and move her mother closer to family once she was released from the facility. Halloween arrived and I expected to spend it hiding inside. Instead, something beautiful happened. Mrs. Henderson from next door knocked on my door that afternoon with a plate of cookies. "We're so sorry you've been going through this, dear. Tonight the whole street is coming together. You're not alone here." That evening, families with kids came trick-or-treating, but they also stopped to check on me, to tell me they were keeping an eye out. Mr. Henderson sat on his porch all night, just being present. The community had rallied around me in a way I never expected. Over the next 2 weeks, I started seeing a trauma therapist that Jennifer recommended. The nightmares were intense, and I needed help processing everything. My principal gave me a few personal days, and my coworkers covered my classes without complaint. My parents drove up from California and stayed for a week, helping me feel secure again. Carol's house sold in 10 days to a young family with 2 small kids. When they moved in, I was cautious, but they were exactly what they seemed. Normal, friendly, respectful of boundaries. 2 months later, life had returned to something close to normal. I still have all the cameras and the alarm system, and I probably always will. I still check the locks twice before bed, and I probably always will. But I also have good neighbors now who look out for each other. Mrs. Henderson brings over soup when I'm tired from work. The new family's kids wave to me every morning. I've learned to trust my instincts earlier, to not dismiss red flags as overthinking. I almost let Carol's actions steal my dream of homeownership from me, but I refused. This is my house, my sanctuary, and I earned it. Sometimes healing means accepting that you'll always be a little more cautious, a little more aware. But it also means recognizing that you survived something terrifying and came out stronger. I still love my little bungalow on Maple Street, and I'm not going anywhere. It was just another quiet Tuesday night in my apartment in Portland. My wife, Sarah, was on a business trip in Chicago for the whole week, and I had the place to myself. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so my hours are weird, but I actually like working late when it's silent. Our building is one of those modern, secure places. You need a key fob for everything: the main door, the garage, even the garbage chute room. The hallways are always brightly lit, and the neighbors are friendly in that Pacific Northwest way. We'll nod and say hello, maybe hold the elevator, but that's about it. It's safe, predictable, except for Mrs. Miller at the end of the hall. She was in her late 70s, a tiny woman with a cloud of soft white hair and glasses that were always slipping down her nose. She lived here for decades, they said. Sarah and I had been here for 3 years, and in that time Mrs. Miller had brought us homemade banana bread at least 6 times. She was always worried about the little things. "Jake, dear, did you notice the light bulb out by the stairwell? Or the forecast says ice tonight, you should move your Chinese letter plants." She was the neighborhood grandmother, harmless, sweet, a little lonely maybe. That night I was deep in a project, headphones on, trying to ignore the fact I'd been sitting for 5 hours straight. It was around 9 in the evening when I heard it. A soft, persistent knocking at my door. Not loud, but insistent. I sighed, saved my file, and went to the peephole. It was Mrs. Miller. She was wringing her hands. I opened the door. "Mrs. Miller, everything okay?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide behind her glasses. She seemed flustered. Her usually neat hair was a bit tousled, and her cardigan was buttoned wrong, one side hanging lower than the other. "Oh, Jake, I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, her voice a thin, worried whisper. "It's my smoke alarm, the one in the hallway ceiling. It's been chirping for an hour now, that awful little beep. It's right above my linen closet and I can't reach it, even with my step stool. My Harold, he always handled these things." She looked down, her shoulders slumping with a practiced helplessness. A beeping smoke alarm, of course. It was the most mundane, believable problem. Annoying, but not an emergency. I was in an old t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot. "It's no trouble," I said, though I felt a flicker of irritation at the interruption. "Let me just grab my keys." "Oh, you're an angel," she breathed, clutching her hands to her chest. I followed her down the hall, the cool laminate floor under my feet. Her apartment was at the very end, facing the quiet inner courtyard. She fumbled with her keys for a moment before opening the door. The smell hit me first. It was a thick, closed-in scent of old furniture, potpourri, and something faintly medicinal. Her apartment was immaculate, but in an obsessive way. Every knick-knack on her shelf was perfectly aligned. The sofa had plastic protectors on the arms. It was quiet, too quiet. "It's in here," she said, leading me to the short hallway that held her bedroom and bathroom. She pointed at a smoke detector on the ceiling. I dragged a small wooden chair from her dining set and stood on it. I examined the device. It was an older model. I pressed the test button. Silence. I listened. Nothing. No low battery chirp. No sound at all. "I don't hear anything, Mrs. Miller," I said, starting to step down. That's when I heard the distinct, solid asterisk click-thunk of a deadbolt engaging. Then the softer asterisk snick asterisk of the security chain being slid into place. I turned my head. Mrs. Miller was at her front door. She had just locked it with both locks, from the inside. She turned around and saw me looking. She offered a small, tight smile. "Just a precaution, dear. This neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. You can never be too careful." My stomach did a slow, cold roll. Why would you lock the door when your neighbor is inside helping you? A primal alarm, faint but clear, sounded in the back of my mind. I quickly got off the chair. "The alarm isn't beeping," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "It must have stopped. I should get back to my work." I moved to walk past her toward the door. She didn't move aggressively, but she shifted her slight frame to stand directly in the center of the narrow hallway entry, blocking my path to the living room and the door beyond. "Jake," she said, her voice had changed. The frail, whispery quality was gone, replaced by something flat and calm. "Before you go, I feel I must tell you something, as a friend." I stopped. "What is it?" She looked at me with an expression of deep, sorrowful concern. "It's about Sarah, your wife. I don't think she's been entirely honest with you." The words were so absurd, so out of left field that I almost laughed. "What are you talking about?" "A few weeks ago, in the parking garage, I saw her. She was in a car, a blue sedan, with a man. They were talking very closely. It didn't look like a casual conversation, Jake." She delivered the lines with the grave sincerity of a bad actor. It was a complete fabrication. Sarah had been out of town for a client presentation during the time she was describing. This wasn't gossip. This was a calculated move. She was trying to upset me, to throw me off balance, to engage me in an emotional discussion in her locked apartment. "You must be mistaken," I said, keeping my voice even. "That couldn't have been Sarah. Now, please, I really need to go." I took a step forward. She didn't budge. "You should sit down," she said, not asking. "We need to talk this through for your own good." The last vestige of polite pretense evaporated. "Mrs. Miller, move. I am leaving." Her face hardened. The kindly old lady mask slipped, and what was underneath was chilling in its blank intensity. She wasn't angry, she was resolved. Her eyes flicked toward her living room. "Do you see that photograph?" She pointed to a small, ornate frame on a side table. It showed a younger Mrs. Miller with a stern-looking man and a girl in her late teens. "That's my daughter, Caroline. She left me, chose to go live with that man." She spat the word man, meaning her ex-husband. "After everything I did for her, she chose him." The pieces, jagged and awful, clicked into place. This wasn't about a smoke alarm or fake infidelity. This was about a profound, festering loneliness that had curdled into something else. She had watched Sarah and me, the happy young couple, from down the hall. And with Sarah gone, I was the available stand-in, a proxy for the family that had abandoned her. She had lured me in with a simple request, locked the door, and now she was keeping me. The realization was a cold wave washing over me. I was trapped in a perfectly normal apartment with a person whose reality had deeply fractured. Confrontation seemed dangerous. She was small. But desperation makes people strong and unpredictable. The locked door was between me and the outside world. My phone was on my desk back in my apartment. I had nothing. So I switched tactics. I let my shoulders slump, feigning a defeat I didn't entirely have to fake. That's terrible, Mrs. Miller. I can't imagine how that must feel." Her expression softened just a fraction. The mask tried to slip back on. "It's a pain that never leaves." Would you like some tea?" I asked, gesturing weakly toward her kitchen. "Maybe we could talk for a minute. I just need to process what you said about Sarah." It was a gamble. The kitchen had a wall phone, an old beige rotary dial model I'd noticed when I walked in. It also had knives. She considered me, her head tilted. Then she nodded. "That's a good idea, dear. I'll put the kettle on." She led the way to the kitchen but positioned herself carefully between me and the doorway back to the hall. I was being herded. As she filled the kettle from the sink, I tried to keep her talking. "Your ex-husband, did he live here in Portland?" "For a time," she said vaguely, her back to me. I glanced at the wall phone. It was 6 feet away. The cord was short, maybe 4 feet long. I'd have to be right next to it to use it. Then I looked out the small kitchen window. It overlooked a section of the dimly lit parking garage. And I saw movement. Our neighbors from 2 doors down, Chloe and Mark, a young couple, were just getting out of their car, laughing, carrying grocery bags. They were home. My heart began to pound against my ribs. This was my chance. The water started to simmer in the kettle. Mrs. Miller turned to get 2 mugs from a high cupboard, her back fully to me for 3 precious seconds. I didn't go for the phone. I didn't have time. Instead, I acted on pure, desperate instinct. I grabbed the heavy metal kettle from the stovetop just as it began to whistle, and with all my strength I swung it down, not at her, but onto her spotless granite countertop. The crash was spectacular, a deafening, metallic bang that echoed like a gunshot in the small, enclosed space. Boiling water and the kettle itself flew across the counter and onto the floor with a tremendous clatter. "Damn it!" I yelled, the shock in my voice completely real. Mrs. Miller shrieked and spun around, her hands flying to her mouth, eyes wide with genuine surprise and confusion at the sudden, violent noise. And right on cue, less than 5 seconds later, there was a loud, urgent knocking on her front door. A man's voice, Mark's, called out, "Mrs. Miller, hey, everything okay in there? We heard a huge crash." Mrs. Miller froze. She looked from the wreckage on her floor to me, to the front door. The conflict on her face was clear. Answer the door and explain the chaos, or maintain control over the situation with me. I didn't give her the chance to decide. I stepped around the puddle of water, my voice loud and clear for the people in the hall. "It's okay. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Miller, I'm so clumsy. Let me get the door and explain to them." I walked quickly past her. She didn't try to stop me. She just stood amidst the steam and the broken kettle, looking suddenly very old and very lost. My hands were shaking as I reached her front door. I flipped the deadbolt, slid the chain off, and pulled the door open. Mark and Chloe were standing there, faces etched with concern. Behind them, I saw another neighbor's door crack open an inch. "Jake," Mark said, confused. "What happened? It sounded like the ceiling caved in." I forced a shaky, embarrassed laugh. No, just me being a complete idiot. I was helping Mrs. Miller check her smoke alarm and I tripped, knocked the whole kettle off the stove. What a mess. I'm so sorry for the noise. I stepped out into the hallway, the cool air feeling like freedom. I turned back to Mrs. Miller, who had slowly walked into view behind me. Her face was pale. "Thank you for your help, Mrs. Miller. I'll let you clean up. I should get back." My words were polite, but my tone was final. She just nodded slowly, her eyes not meeting mine. "Of course, dear." I didn't wait. I walked straight down the hall to my apartment, fumbled with my key, and got inside. I locked my own door, throwing the deadbolt and attaching the security chain I almost never used. I leaned against the door, my breath coming in short gasps. Then I called Sarah. I told her everything, my voice trembling. She was on the next flight home. Then I called the building's non-emergency security line, and finally the police non-emergency number. I reported a concerning incident with an elderly neighbor who had effectively detained me under false pretenses and displayed disturbing, unstable behavior. It took a few days. The building manager spoke with her. The police did a wellness check. They contacted a nephew who lived in Seattle. The story that emerged was a sad, familiar one. Her daughter hadn't just moved away. She'd gotten a restraining order years ago due to obsessive, harassing behavior. Mrs. Miller's loneliness had metastasized into a fixation, and that night I had been the target. She was gone within 2 weeks, moved to a facility near her nephew. The apartment was cleaned and rented out to a graduate student a month later. I still live here, but I never answer the door when I'm alone now without checking my phone is in my pocket. I had the building install a peephole camera, and I understand now that the most unsettling horror isn't found in shadows or strange noises. It's in the moment a familiar face, a friendly smile, shifts into something else entirely, and you realize the person next door was someone you never knew at all.